Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain.
Well, it's a beautiful Monday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
Amaya Makinde, good morning and welcome.
And good morning from Abuja, where the sun has risen beautifully. I'm Maokwe Yusuf.
Oh, well, in that case, I've got good news for you, everybody. This life is temporary, but I'll tell you the rest later.
Okay.
How about that? Oh, dear. But what a weekend it was, really. Depending on what your interest was, or even if it wasn't, I mean, somehow you just saw it. But the sports world, I know, the football world was hit with that European League and what's going to happen. Will UEFA ban them? And FIFA's response, that's a huge yes for football lovers, actually. But back home here, I think it even began way before the weekend. The trend, different tags concerning the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Mr. Pantami, and it's, boy, you just can't ignore it. There's different comments as to what's going on, what is the real situation, how did we get to where we are, what should be the next processes or the next steps that should be taken, where will this lead us all to for all of those involved. And remember, it kind of started out with that news about the watch list. He eventually, I think it's AIDS or something, said no. The reporter didn't come across as though that was the intention to get the report out. And there was an apology, sudden retraction, and then you thought that was it, but it still blew up in our faces and still unfolded. And then he eventually commented, saying that, look, those comments ascribed to him, attributed to him, were when he was 13. It was a long time ago. Ever since then, he's done different things. But then you have people who then thought, okay, but what about while you were in university? Does that still, can that still fly? As you have said, it is. So it is huge. And as though you thought you heard the last of it, the PDP themselves eventually went on and weighed in on the matter. There you go. They did put up a statement about some of this, and they did say that they were asking the Department of State Services to immediately invite the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Mr. Pantami, for questioning over his earlier views on Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The party also demands that President Muhammadu Buhari should sack the minister, given the sensitivity of the issue at stake. A statement by the party further reads, our party position is predicated on the heightening concerns in the public space and in the international arena of possible compromises by the communication minister, who has access to sensitive government documents and information, in addition to data of all individuals, including high-profile personalities in the public and private sectors, as well as traditional and faith-based circles. The PDP wants the DSS to investigate the allegation, which, according to the party, has created apprehension, particularly given the rise in banditry and other terrorist activities in the country. So you just thought, wow, what next now?
It's a big question, really. And I think when that question is asked, it is mostly asked of the government, because he's a member of the government. Well, like you referenced, he has responded in some sense, saying that, well, he did say those things, but that was at a time when he didn't know better, and according to him, he knows better. And as you referenced, I mean, some of those things, a lot of those things were said when he was in school and even afterwards. So it has been established that those things indeed were said by him. I mean, there are a lot of videos flying around online right now, and I think he was responding to those videos. So he did say them. And a couple of issues come to mind, because this is a member of the government, and I keep asking myself, what is good in this case? What is fair? What is equitable? What is justice in this case? And I mean, that's what a government should represent, all of those things. If you look to government and you don't see those things, then, I mean, it's safe to say you don't have a government. I recall the case of, I mean, because you need to go back in time and see the trend. This is a government that came on, with the mantra of ending corruption, fighting insecurity, and fixing the economy. And that was mainly why a lot of people trooped out to vote for this government. And it was overwhelming. I mean, for the very first time, an incoming government defeated, or rather, the opposition defeated incumbent. So the incumbent didn't get a second term. So it was once in a lifetime kind of thing, and it happened. But I recall the case of the former Minister of Finance. It was something related. And remember what happened. She resigned. She put out a statement. If you go to her Twitter handle, the last thing you would see is the statement about the NYC certificate, how she did not know and how she was, leaving office just to ensure that that mantra of fighting corruption stays with the government. Fast forward to the case of the former CJN, Justice Walter Onoge, and you recall how things moved swiftly, just to show that, in some sense, we wouldn't condone corruption. At least that was what the government said at that time. And fast forward again to the case of the former EFCC chairman, or former acting EFCC chairman. You recall how things moved. There was this panel of sorts raised, and in fact we don't know the outcome of that, but you see how things moved. So when government wants to act, government will act, and it's quite loud that the government has not said anything at this point. I know that a lot of coloration has been put to this.
That's the presidency.
Oh yes,
or the presidency.
I know a lot of coloration has been put to this, and I think that's the challenge sometimes. When issues happen, rather than look at the issues, different colorations begin to come in. And at the end of the day, the water is so muddled that you don't go to the root of the matter. This is a very sensitive case. I mean, we're still recovering from the case of the CCT chairman, seeing that video and what played out, and the fact that...
And look into NBA.
Oh, yes.
What will they... How far would they go with
and
that?
Even the government saying that we're looking into this, at least give out something. So barely recovering from that, this comes up, and this has huge ramifications. So yet again, I ask, what is fair, what is equitable, what is just in this case?
Well, gentlemen, you've identified some stuff. Add to that list the former Minister of Aviation, who had to leave office based on allegations of corruption.
Don't go to... Well, can we go a little far? You like history. What about the Minister of Power, Pantami?
Okay. And so many others over time. You read the report, the statement from the PDP. I'm looking forward to the statement of the APC as well, to see how that pans out. All of these, gentlemen, is about extremist views based on religion. And we know how touchy that kind of topic is in our part of the world, and definitely something that we need to be very, very careful when we're talking about it. We say that, the internet doesn't forget. I guess this is just the internet confirming to us.
Two or three trends now. Pantami should resign. Pantami will not resign.
It was number 4 this morning. As of last night.
It is still number 4. I mean, just as about the time we were coming on, and we need to also separate. We need to separate the issues. Number one, which of the scriptures stood with the things that the minister said? Which of the scriptures in the the religion spoke to those things, the views that he held at that time? Some things don't change. Scriptures don't change. So I think what can change is our interpretation of them. So what scriptures confirmed or supported the views that the minister held from the time he was 13 until he was in university and all of that. And then also don't forget that the minister has been in power since 2016. DG of NIDA, from 2016 and 2019 he became a minister. Were these things unknown to the DSS? Remember that the Terrorism Act also made a statement that if you as much as hold such views, you are at risk of being a terrorist. Is this information lost on the DSS before he was recommended to be minister, and so many other things like that? So I go with Kayode this morning, what is equitable, what is fair, and all of that, but the right thing ought to be done.
Incidentally, that is subjective.
No, of course. No.
See from different perspectives.
I agree with you, but then it always has to be based on facts that cannot be repudiated, facts that you cannot change. Your philosophies, your personal ideologies, your personal philosophies are based on one thing or the other.
So are we looking to institutions to, what will those institutions do? who are supposed to have checked certain things.
Most certainly. And then when we talk about institutions, for God's sake, why would there are reports, well, the truth has been pulled down. Now, talking about institutions, we have been talking about separating institutions from individuals for God knows how long. What is the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy doing, tweeting about, the minister as a person?
Or the ministry?
Minister. The Twitter handle of the minister, saying that the minister needs to stay and all of that.
Oh, we've seen the Ministry of Information tweet about politics, core politics, I think, at that time.
Individuals should be separated from government. That fact ought to be there. So, well, gentlemen, it's a long haul, and we're only waiting, as gentlemen have said, what will government, whether it's the federal government of Nigeria through the Ministry of Information or the presidency through the normal routes of communication, say now? Mark.
Are you throwing that to me to find out what they will say? Because I don't have...
Maybe because you're in Abuja,
simply because you're in Abuja.
Forget the fact that I live in Abuja. Oftentimes, we don't hear anything. We hear it about the same time we hear it in Lagos. I was wondering this time around whether we're going to hear anything from a presidency that has developed the art or has transformed the art of being mute in the face of very disturbing controversy. And I think that this time around, we're going to wait and see whether or not this time around they'll break with the norm. Because, I mean, you and I know that we've taken up more than how many issues that ordinarily should elicit a response from a government. And oftentimes what we hear is deafening silence. I hope that this will not be one of those issues. Yesterday, listening to the news at 10, a number of issues came up which have now been taken up in a very partisan manner. One of them is the 60 billion naira printing, money printing, and we've seen the different coloration being given to that particular statement made by the governor of Edo State. The last of it we heard was from the CBN itself, which did not deny that it printed money, but said it was only doing its duty. Interestingly, the PDP came out with a statement, and we saw a counter statement from the APC, which was telling the PDP to let the government of the day and the CBN do its job. Now, on this particular matter, a lot of people will say that the PDP, the People's Democratic Party, has summarized how a lot of people feel about it, about, the alleged allegations against the Minister of Communications that he could be sympathetic to religious extremist organizations. He has denied that particular, or he has said, well, that was in the past. The question is, how come all of these facts are just surfacing now? Now, interestingly, we haven't seen any response, which we would normally see or expect to see from the APC, which could mean one thing, is that they are also, on the side of the PDP on this particular matter, or waiting for higher authorities to actually respond to the matter. So we wait and see. But these allegations are not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. Let's not forget that Nigeria is in the middle of a crisis. A very big crisis, a very big security crisis. We have been at this battle with extremist groups. Now they're groups, because before it was just Boko Haram, but we have since learned that they have the support of ISWAP, they have the support of ISIS. There are factions within them that are forming coalitions with these different groups, and while we're quelling one, another one will spring up somewhere. We've been at this now for about 12 years, and they're wondering, how is it that, we're getting rid of one set, or it will seem that the government on the one hand will have the upper hand, the next minute it will seem that it has gone back up. There are big questions to be asked. Why does it seem like as if this war is never going to end? So this kind of allegation cannot just go away. We also have, kidnapping being on the rise, and we've seen, parallels being drawn between what is happening in the Northwest and what happened in the Niger Delta. Even the people have said, no, they're not the same thing. But these things are there. And they cannot be dismissed by a wave of hand. When the Nigeria Governors Forum asked the federal government to help make sense of all that is going on, they too seem a bit confused. So we all look to the government of the day, because they are the ones that have the leadership. They're the ones in charge of leadership. They're the ones to provide leadership in this instance, to say something. What is going on? The minister himself too should respond to all of these allegations. The fact, so many videos and audio messages have come out just over the weekend. Where have these things been? Of course, they also raise questions about the state of our screening process. How did the DSS screen him? How did this miss also the attention of the Senate? Big questions to be asked, gentlemen. But, I mean, we wait and see. But I sincerely hope that silence will not be one of the responses that will be given.
Well, big one there, so we'll just see, since the minister has already started speaking. So what should you do now? Face everyone and speak about this in a long... But let's see. Let's take a look at some of the dailies. Some of them equally have some coverage, reportage on the matter. But we're going to start with Vanguard. It's a bit different there. Alleged printing of 60 billion naira. They're still talking about that. APC, PDP governors at war over Obaseki's claims. Obaseki is wrong. APC governors insist, say his accusation unfortunate, urge CBN and Emefiele not to be distracted. So, there you go. So who knows, maybe tomorrow, will there be a war over these trends to go
selective
or
war.
Not to be?
Selective
war?
Apparently.
There you go. Leave Obaseki alone. PDP governors warn FG APC governors. His claim can't be spurious, Wike. So, so that means that well, when politicians speak about some of these things, it comes across as, are they politicizing economic? I thought facts are supposed to be facts. Figures are 1 + 1 should be 2. Is it 11 or 22? Depending on who speaks about it.
When you are doing further maths, 1 + 1 is sometimes not 2.
Really? That's not my fault, that maths. 1 + 1 is always 2.
I'm tempted to ask, which school is that?
I didn't say it's not. I said it's sometimes. So please.
Oh dear.
Wow. Insecurity. WIC rejects Ibubago, asks Southeast governors to fortify ESN. WIC.
Oh, what's
World Igbo Congress.
Oh, right.
Based in
page 13. You get that detail right there. That's the reason why they put it there. Southeast governors Ohanese, others compiling names of IPOB members, ESN operatives to hand over to military, as ascribed to IPOB. Ohanese warns against military deployment to Southeast Zone. Igbo group worries over situation in Southeast, increasing insecurity in Southeast, unsettling Anglican bishops. Incidentally, both acronyms. Okay, well, Ibubago is not security network. It's just Ibubago.
It is security. It's a
is it also ESN?
Oh, right. No, of course. The governor spoke about that day we had it. Called it an illegality. That's what he said.
No. You didn't
talk about the acronym.
Ibubago Security Network. Is that what that is? Is that ESN as well?
Eastern Security Network.
That question's up. I answered the one I heard when you asked.
Okay, so better take back your tweets. Well, take a look at Mr. and Mrs. next now. Mrs. just telling Mr. things are a bit tough. So the woman runs a small shop to make ends meet while the man helps with household chores. You mean when the chips are down, you can't emulate him? Well, Mrs. seems to be shocked at how Mr's attitude is. But Mr. response says, God forbids bad chips. I want to remain Minister of Finance who pays the bills and calls the shots, not the Minister of Home Affairs you just described. So, ouch. There you go. Don't forget to check out the back page and see that European League matter is also there. They've got several others. That's Vanguard today.
Well, let's quickly walk you through the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, which leads with PDP others mount pressure on Buhari to sack Pantami. DSS should also investigate him. PDP adds, Middle Belt Forum wants him to resign. Pantami should not succumb to blackmail. Murik. That's on page 3, so it's a lot. That story is not going away anytime soon, it would seem. And you see global COVID-19 death toll surpasses 3 million. It's a very grim one. Just reminds us how far we have come. In fact, that, well, this is not over. Just one more. Neither APC nor PDP can redeem Nigeria. That's credited to Yakasai. So is he speaking your mind? Well, more details on page 23 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
Daily Trust. Exclusive. Terrorism financing. Dozens arrested in nationwide crackdown. BDC operators, gold dealers, others netted in. Billions trapped. More businessmen marked for arrest. Military personnel affected. Union calls for speedy investigation. That story is on page 5. That picture there is of residents wading through the flooded Lagos-Abeokuta Expressway in Lagos. I hope we don't see any fatality like we did last year as a result of flooding. Let's do what we need to do. Right under the nameplate, among others there, media frenzy over Buhari's health. That story is on page 4. What's that about? The details are on the inside pages. Markwe.
Well, let's see if we can quickly find for you what Abuja Inquirer is saying this morning. And you see there on the front page, it should pop up anytime soon. Abuja motorists in for a tough ride. That's what they have on their front page. Lawyers ask for reps amendment. I don't know why it's taking a while to pop up. The Abuja Inquirer is what we're reviewing. And it has on the front page, Abuja motorists in for a tough ride. The big, the other small header on top of the story says, as controversial park and pay policy returns. Yes, indeed, that policy, we heard about it last week that it was going to come back to the Federal Capital Territory. It had come before, it was taken away, and now I think it's been amended, and now it's been brought back. The question is, what if I don't want to drive? What are the alternatives for transport within the Federal Capital Territory? I mean, big questions, but if you can pick up a copy of the Abuja Inquirer, that's what's on the front page. How FCTA disregards master plan for special interest. If I want to know what special interest that is. And they also have that story there. PDP security experts hit Pantami. Yeah, that's also on the front page of the Abuja Inquirer. A number of other stories are on the front page, but since it's not popping up, I can only tease what's on the front page and leave you to find a copy of the Abuja Inquirer this morning. Gentlemen.
I thought there are other papers there, Mark. Okay. Let's go ahead then. Let's see. The Guardian's got this one. Hurdles for air travelers as nations okay vaccine passport. Subtle discrimination awaits global travel, tourism in a two-tier world. Experts divided over policy, rally for improved vaccination locally. Fan, airpeas vaccinate staffers, frontline workers. So who knows? Interesting times awaits travelers. That's the Guardian this morning.
Well, next up is New Telegraph. You see, Obaseki's 60 billion naira currency printing expose. That's how New Telegraph tags it. Governors' parties at war. PGF faults claim, explains FG's expenditures. Don't crucify Edo governor. Heed his advice. PDP governors, CBN has right to print money. APC. Now, ADC says ruling party has bastardized economy. Oh dear. Lost my breath trying to capture all that one. It's on page 3 of the New Telegraph this morning, and there's something for you on 2023 president. I mean, this is something you always get them at war over. South-South leaders back Southeast. Clark says we're together. Wants South-South Ndibo to give up ambition. Ohaneze says Nigeria in agony. It's time to synergize. Well, you can say that again. Oh, there's a couple of other stories really on the front page of a New Telegraph, but we'll let you do the picking this morning.
Blueprint newspaper has this one. Jonathan replies ex-Governor Aliyu on 2015. You are a pathetic relevance seeker. What does that mean? The details are on the inside pages. Challenges ex-governor to show...
Or the context?
The story.
What part?
Okay.
The story.
Which story? The headline?
Yes.
You've not read the story. You just read the headline.
You are a pathetic relevance seeker. What does that mean?
I can define those words for you.
Yeah.
Yes. What does that statement mean?
Okay.
They know what it means.
It's on the inside pages.
Right.
Page 6 specifically. Yeah. Challenges ex-governor to show evidence of agreements. The details you'll find again, as I said, on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Set up 6 probe of missing 106 billion naira in 149 MDAs. Again, money, money, money. That's the much of that we can take this morning.
Okay, so there you go. Then that is it. We'll look at some of the dailies here today. Well, back in a moment. Do stay with us.
If you understand the concept of printing of money is about lending money, right? That is our job, right? To print is about saying lending money. So there's no need putting all the controversy about printing of money as if we're going into the factory printing naira and then distributing on the street. It is very inappropriate for people to just give some coloration to the word printing of money as if it is some foreign word coming from the sky. Okay, so I think it's important for me to put it this way, that in 2015, 2016, the kind of situations we find ourselves now, which is even worse than what we faced in 2015, 2016, we did provide budget support facility for all the states of this country. That loan remains unpaid till now, and we are going to insist on the states paying back those monies going forward, since they are accusing us of giving them loans. That's what they're saying. And most countries in the world today are confronted by not only health challenges coming from the pandemic of COVID, and also economic crisis and the rest of them. And what I keep saying this, it would be irresponsible for the Central Bank of Nigeria or any central bank or any Fed to stand idle and then refuse to support its government at this time. And what is being done, right, is being done in any climb. And at the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting, I did say, and I gave data about what is being done, even in developed economies, about what needs to be done to shore up their economy and take them out of recession. Nigeria is unfortunately in a very bad situation. I'm not going to pretend about it, in the sense that we are facing problem about productivity output, which is GDP. Luckily, we managed to just come out of it with a hair's breadth. And we are working very hard to see how we can not only have our head above water, but get our waist above water. That is what we are focused on right now. And of course, we are also confronted by issues of inflation and prices and the rest of them. And so for us to begin to see that some people playing some games, trying to come up with overheating this polity, talking about printing of money, I think is very unfortunate and totally inappropriate. And I would like to advise that this should stop. We should all work for the growth of our country and not playing politics.
We will run a federation relying almost exclusively on crude oil, fossil fuel. With the advent of COVID last year, there was a wake-up call, a shock to the world, which you know all the crisis, but politically triggered off a change in the government in America. And since President Biden came into power, the Americans, US government, have put so much money in such a short time trying to look for alternatives. And where we are in the world today, from what I see and I know, is that we will be fortunate because nobody is investing in fossil fuel, in crude oil. Nobody. They're looking at alternatives. The Japanese are now getting energy from water. They're extracting hydrogen from oxygen to generate energy. This is where we are in the world today. So for a country that is still hoping on crude oil, it's only a question of time. And pretending and doing all sorts of, interesting financial gymnastics to keep it going. It's only a question of time. And it's not a long time.
Well, indeed, his earlier comments, that's the comment of Mr. Godwin Obaseki, Governor of Edo State, on alleged printing of 60 billion naira, was the first comment that generated a response from the CBN governor, which you saw there. Initially, we had heard from the Minister of Finance, who said that wasn't quite correct. But the CBN governor did not say it wasn't correct. He said that, the country is in a bad shape and that the CBN is only doing what it needs to do. However, perhaps to add more, or to put what he was saying in context, the governor of Edo State has also spoken again, talking about just how delicate our situation is. But we have with us this morning someone who can help shed light on where it is that, we should be going, or what it is we're looking at in terms of funding future budgets. We have with us Mr. Ben Akabweze, who is the Director General of the Budget Office. You're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you, Mokwe.
We also have with us Mr. Wale Oluwade, who is the CEO of Growth Masters Consulting. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Good morning.
And I also understand that Professor Ken Ife will be joining us. He's a macroeconomic policy analyst. Gentlemen, let me first of all start with you, Mr. Ben Akabweze. When you heard the initial comments, what have you made of the initial comments of, printing 60 billion naira, the denial, no, we didn't print, and the CBN now saying, look, we're in a bad shape, we only did what we need to do as lender of last resort?
Well, let me explain. I'd hoped that we'll go past this controversy and just focus on what we need to do. But, the truth is, yes, as the central bank governor admitted, there is what is called technically printing money. When you avail government, for instance, if central bank avails government facilities. But the reality is what is shared at FAC is not from what the central bank avails. What is shared at FAC is revenues generated by the revenue generating agencies, okay, which is vetted by the FAC, committee of commissioners and the Accountant General, and they agree that these represent the revenues. You've heard sometimes there's controversy and they say, no, we don't agree. There should be more coming from this agency, stuff like that. Each, tier of government, the federal government takes its own. The reality then is that what federal government gets from FAC is not adequate to meet its own obligations as federal government. And so it resorts to borrowings. And sometimes that borrowing includes borrowing from the central bank. So in truth, as the Minister of Finance said, what is shared at FAC is not the dead money. But, it's not denial that there is what tantamounts to money, which also, when the state governors, the governments take their own share and go back, and when they have, they have shortfalls, sometimes they also look up to the central bank for support, as the governor indicated. So I think we need to just clarify how it happens.
Indeed, that clarification is very important, because what people would like to know is the true situation. For a number of people, I mean, I don't know if you saw how the dailies reflected the minister's words. It became, Obaseki, you lied. It was that somebody wasn't telling the truth somewhere. So if at the end of the day they were both correct, that needs to be put out there, that it's just a misinterpretation of how the facts have been put out. That's what you're trying to say, right?
Well, I have clarified the process to you, how it works. Okay, at FAC, what's shared is not internet money.
I just wanted I wanted to reiterate it.
Revenues generated by the agencies, but in reality, those revenues currently are not adequate to meet our needs, and so government resorts to borrowing, and that includes the federal government and the state governments. Sometimes borrowing happens from the central bank, but if everybody approaches the central bank independently, or the governors sometimes, collectively. But the federal government approaches the central bank independently.
That's what I wanted to know, whether they go individually or they go as a collective. In which case, would he also have been correct to say that, oh, the last money we shared was printed by the CBN? I'm just wondering.
Yes, at times there are programs that the central bank avails all of the states, and even then it's not mandatory. It's every state. I remember once, Lagos State opted out, so they didn't need to, the bailout funds, for instance. Okay, so to that extent, ultimately every state makes its individual decision as to whether or not it wants to borrow. But as to what is shared, everybody gets their share based on the approved revenue allocation formula.
In recent times, though, there have been huge questions about the situation of our debt. The federal government has tried to allay fears that, looking at our debt to GDP ratio, we're still doing okay. But if you look at how much we're expending on debt servicing in our budget, the figure is alarming, you must admit.
Yes, and we've never been shy of admitting that. The Honorable Minister earlier this year made a public presentation on the breakdown in January this year of the 2021 budget. If you refer to it, and your folks were there, put it out clearly that the debt service to revenue ratio was of concern. I have personally made a number of presentations this year, on the budget. I spoke at an ICANN forum on this. I spoke at the Lagos Business School Breakfast Club on this, just among a number of others. And we have never been putting it out there that there is, you can't run away completely from the debt to GDP ratio, because it's one of the indicators of debt sustainability. But it's not the only one. When you look at the debt sustainability analysis that the Debt Management Office does, all of the other factors are taken on board.
What other factors?
I mean, it's not even just the size of your debt. The structure of your debt is important. What is the tenor of your debt? What's the mix of your debt between local currency and foreign currency? These are all factors in ultimately determining the sustainability of your debt.
So right now, would you say that our debt is sustainable?
Our debt currently is still sustainable. However, we can't continue at current pace. And so we must fix the core issue, which is our revenues. And that's why that's been the focus of all of the initiatives and the drive on the fiscal side of public finance management.
Where is the thrust of fiscal policy right now? Because I'm sure you're on the same page. Whatever political differences you might have with the governor of Edo State, but I'm sure that you cannot fault what he said about oil and oil being a major source of revenue, dwindling and becoming irrelevant in the nearest future. What are your thoughts in that regard? What's the federal government's projection as to how quickly oil could become irrelevant and what we should be doing in the meantime to ensure that we're not left in the lurch?
Well, I mean, when you speak to the experts, the oil and gas industry, they tell you fossil fuels are going to remain relevant for in the next 30 to 50 years. But nobody is planning how that long, okay? Because the reality is, you don't know. I mean, these things, these are their best estimates. And oil and gas is one area where the best of experts can suddenly be made to look very, very ignorant. I mean, the one way to ruin your career as an economist is to bet on price of oil. So what we're doing now is we're saying, look, we need to diversify, and yes, that's become a cliche. For the last 4 decades, everybody's talking about diversification, but we need to really then put action, behind it. But the reality is we currently need oil to diversify away from oil. Unfortunately, our current reality is that oil and gas still accounts for over 90% of foreign exchange. Our current reality is that the industrial and service sector is still heavily import dependent, and oil and gas generates that foreign exchange that you need. So you can't simply shut down that and hope that the other side will go, and which is why whenever oil prices decline, the whole economy suffers. So we've got to create an export-led economy. We've got to create alternative sources of foreign exchange, in addition to simultaneously reducing import dependence as an economy. And for instance, there should be no need for us to be importing food. So if we can eliminate that, that will be a key thing. If we can move to domestic refining of our petroleum products, that will save about 30 to 40% of the current demand for foreign exchange on the market.
Well, Mr. Oluwale, let me come to you. You have spoken about, how our budget should be structured. You've had your own ideas about how budget should be structured. Looking at the fact that we're now in a pretty delicate situation, what are your thoughts? Because first and foremost, some people say, we need to invest heavily, but right now, the monies to invest are simply not there. Yeah. In terms of borrowing, we already are seeming to be getting overstretched in that regard. What do you think we need to do to jumpstart productivity?
Thank you very much, Maokwe. I listened to Mr. Kabweze, and I'm at a loss, really, why we still find ourselves in this precarious situation. Quantitative easing or printing money, if you use a colloquial term, is not really a problem. It's not meant to be a permanent situation, not to be a band-aid as stopgap measure in any economy. But when it becomes often, or it becomes repetitive, then it becomes a threat, as it is currently, because then, number one, there is a risk of inflation, runaway inflation. What's the inflationary rate for Nigeria right now? 18 point something, thereabouts. Then, of course, if you have, runaway inflation, and then, of course, you're going to have increase in national debt, like we have also. I remember when 1999, national debt about $36 billion, thereabouts, and it was, we made strenuous efforts, wiped off that debt. Now we're currently at $85 billion US. That's. I mean, I lack adjectives to describe that. Yes, it's true that that represents 25% thereabout of our GDP. So it's okay, because we have America, for instance, who has almost 100% debt to GDP ratio. But that's not the point. The point is debt to revenues. Now, as of first quarter last year, our debt revenue was around 99. Around May, it came down to about 72%, thereabouts. That's ridiculous. What economy can survive? in this situation. You know, and another, situation that, this printing of money, like I said, using this colloquial term, does, it makes economic managers to be indolent, to be lethargic. Because your last point was, how do we jumpstart or create, a seriously diversified economy, a seriously export-driven economy, because our economy is purely import-driven. We're not earning crude oil. The oil sector accounts for less than 10% of our GDP. But guess what? Accounts for about 80 to 90% of our foreign exchange earnings. Now, if you look at the other sectors of the economy, services, contributes about 55%, then industries about 18%. Why aren't we focusing on that? Let's take services, which is the highest. Agriculture about 29. So take services, which is 55% thereabouts. You have everything from the, informal sector to the artisanal to the MSMEs and all of that. Guess what? We were here about a month ago, 3 weeks thereabouts, talking about the petroleum refinery. It touched on it briefly. Do you know how much money we waste, exporting crude oil and then re-importing it, using scarce FX to do that? The Port Harcourt refinery that is meant to be so-called rehabilitated with about 1.5 billion, why didn't we put maybe even half of that money to, we're talking about jump-starting the economy, creating jobs and all of that, put in social intervention programs that you and I had spoken about here, May 29, not May 29, May 2019, we were in this same studio, Marco, you and I. And I did mention that there are 3 existential threats to Nigeria. I watched that video again earlier this morning before coming here. Insecurity, number 1. Number 2, unemployment. Number 3, mass poverty. Can you tell me of these 3, which one of them hasn't gotten worse rather than abate? Because if we use $1.5 billion, and pump that money to create jobs, because generally unemployment ratio in Nigeria is about 33-point-something%, but youth unemployment is over 42%.
When you say puts it in social investments,
social intervention programs,
social intervention programs,
yeah.
What's coming to my mind is not jobs.
Okay.
What is coming to my mind is palliatives and, I don't know, what we already currently have. Even though the federal government will argue that, yes, some of it is also to create jobs, but these jobs do not seem to be things that are sustainable. They look like temporary jobs. Is that the kind of...
No.
Is that what you're thinking of? Even
if, a fraction of that will go to SIPs, cash, you call them... some of those handouts, 10,000, money markets, whatever, But a substantial sum should go for MSMEs, and they create jobs. If you're going to reduce youth unemployment, or unemployment generally, if you're going to eradicate poverty in Nigeria, there's no way you're not going to do that through MSMEs. Now, what's our tax to GDP ratio? Less than 5%. Every seriously developed economy is tax-driven, not crude oil. Even nations, that are crude oil exporting nations, don't derive their economy. Their economy is not based on crude oil, revenues.
Are you willing to pay more tax?
Not tax increases, but widen the tax base. How many Nigerians are paying? I just told you the the number of Nigerians paying taxes, the tax to GDP ratio is less than 5%.
Some of the things that you have said, it was similar to what the federal government has said.
That's the problem. The problem is, in Nigeria, we're all experts in terms of knowing the problem, but in terms of the solution, okay, that's where it all begins to fall apart. It's true that the tax to GDP ratio currently is, about 6.5%. The revenue to GDP is 8 to 9%. That's like 50% of the African average. So in reality, and as I talk the question you asked, are you willing to pay more taxes? In reality, we all, those of us sitting in this room, ought to be paying more taxes. That's the reality that you see. That's the part of the discussion that nobody wants. Everybody wants to talk about what they should do, not what we should do. But if you compare our tax rate, our income tax rate, so it's not an either or. We've got to do both. we've got to expand the number of people in the tax net. Okay, and because of the gross informality of the economy, and as you've already pointed out, there's a large, poverty is, large. There are people who are currently employed, who, despite being employed, fall within the poverty threshold, which is why all those earning, the minimum wage and below are exempted from, from tax. Minimum wage is, 30,000 per month, so 360,000 per annum. If you're earning anything like that and below, you're currently exempted from tax. And so, yes, you have a number of people, but who are not taxable. Those of us who are then taxable have got to admit that we need to pay more for taxes. We need to pay more for social services. We need to deal with the issue of regressive, energy subsidies. Whether or not we like it, okay, the current pricing for petrol is not, sustainable, or look at whatever. And it's not just, first, it doesn't cover the cost of the product, There are huge questions. There are huge question marks. So what a lot of people question is government sincerity in that regard. But let's quickly take this now. So Lagos, so my colleagues have questions for you, and of course, Professor Kenike.
Well, all right, let's bring in Professor Ken on this one. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
Well, I haven't listened. Yeah, having listened to both gentlemen, clearly something needs to be done to put our economy in good stead. What will your immediate response be? Because we've got just a few minutes before we go to break.
Yeah, I think I'm very happy with the two gentlemen who have been speaking, and they're right on point. But I need to say on the central questions that are being addressed, that the biggest contradiction in our economy is the configuration, or what you call the structural deformity in the configuration of the downstream, mainstream, midstream, and upstream sector of our oil and gas industry. I mean, for example, why would Nigeria spend over 30 to 40% of our foreign exchange, which incidentally is about 90% coming from this sector, in just reimporting products? Texas in America has more than 200 petrochemical and refineries, and it's just a fraction of what goes on in the geography of what goes on in the Niger Delta. It baffles me that the political economy in the oil and gas sector has not actually been challenged, and not least all the shenanigans going on with the PIB, and that's not what I want to go into at the moment. But I think that is the crux, because when 90% of your revenue, as small as it is in Forex, is hostage to what happens to commodity exports. There's nobody that exports commodity that makes it. I'll just tell you that. There's nobody that does that. You don't make money from just exporting raw materials, and you have no control over the price of those raw materials. And of course, when you look at the 10 biggest economies in the world, none of them depends on oil. Can't look at them, China, Japan, US, none of them, Germany, they are not built on oil. But anyway, but we have to use that oil revenue. We need to create all the states and administration and all that, but we still have to use that to begin that journey into restructuring the economy. But thank God, though, that in the last GDP report, it only accounts for 5.87% of our GDP. While in fact, technology alone, ICT alone, we're not even talking about the whole digital economy. ICT alone is 15%, which is 2.5 times the size of the oil. But the crux is that, yes, we are growing much, much faster than this business, but we're not getting the foreign exchange that we need. So we still need to address the issue of balancing our foreign exchange. And it hits the inflation because you have imported foreign inflation because of what goes on. If people can't get the money, they go to the black market, they buy it with a differential of 80 to 90 naira. They use it to import. You haven't banned the import. We haven't got the powers as such to do it. We don't want to isolate ourselves. So somehow we have to live with a diversification program, even at the export level, to enable us access foreign exchange. But that will change. The second aspect, of course, is because of the situation we have. Now, nobody even talks about the fact that we are a nation at war. And many countries that are experiencing the level of war we are experiencing.
Prof, what we'll do is we'll go to break, but we'll let you continue that train of thoughts when we return in a moment. Please stay with us. Yeah, welcome back. Well, Prof, you were making a point about the second factor, which is the security situation. Could you go ahead, please?
Right. The thing is this, as we're a nation at war in all the 6 geopolitical zones, and that has multiple impact on most macroeconomic factors that are driving the economy, not least the inflation. If we have time, we'll analyze that. Now, the thing is, we are not even imposing like 40% war tax. We have not gone out of our way to borrow, $70, $80 billion to persecute the war. We're just managing. We're managing. And though when you say managing, where do you expect the resource? Taxable revenue is very poor, about 60 to 70% of our GDP. More African average is 18% of GDP. But the challenge is what? Over 80 million people are below poverty line. Over 100 million people can't even pay any tax. So it's just the other 100 million or so that you can hope to get money. It's tough because on paper, Nigeria looks like the lowest tax constituency in Africa. On paper. But when you look at the real tax burden, you feel like Nigeria is the highest. People have to use their own money, companies, to pay for their power generation with generators, pay for borehole, pay for truck. Is unbelievable. So you can't throw away all these, or drive away all these investors because you have embarked on this kind of tax regime. So we have to see how we manage the situation. Then all of these pressures of non-diversified revenue base, external revenue base, non-diversified economic base, not exploiting, we're operating at very low potential. But having said that though, 90 million MSMEs in Africa, 45 million are from Nigeria. 50%, unbelievable, because how can Nigeria be 18% of Africa, 18% of their GDP, and we are punching at a weight of 50% of the MSMEs? It shows you that MSME is a latent competitive advantage for Nigeria. Irrespective of all our challenges, we still have a dynamic workforce and entrepreneurship that wants to drive the future economy. So how do we make sure we deliver whatever they need and we know what they need so that they can drive the growth? Now, let's come back. Let's come down to the final one. The government borrowing is still about 21% of our GDP. On the basis of international benchmarks, it should be about 40%. So we are still okay. But it is the revenue component where the debt service to GDP is running out of control. Should be around 40, but on paper it could be 50, but then by the time you administer it, if it fluctuates between 40 and 60, and it could even go to 70. But that is the reality. But please, let us also recognize that the government is just not sitting. I'm not in government, but I'm anxiously watching what they are doing. Government has created an infrastructure company. What it does is capitalizes 1 trillion. They are looking for 15 trillion capitalization naira to take away all those burden, infrastructure burden that is forcing government to go borrowing, especially externally. So that is good news. That is good news. Also, government is looking at various ways of bringing more money because, for example, national scheme, national savings schemes of that nature that will bring more money comparable, even bigger than the pension fund. They've also, from Finance Act 2020, you've seen how they triggered the setup of that trust to mop up some of those money from the unpaid dividend and what have you, just to make sure that the sources from which government can borrow internally are being diversified. And of course, the money is even safer with government because it will return that money to you any day you want it, 100%. If a bank is holding your money, which they've been doing, and then they go under, you can only get 50% from deposit insurance. So let's understand that case. So what I'm saying that there's so many other things. Government is looking at its assets right now in moving it from a dormant asset to a more active investment status so that we can begin to sweat our assets and improve liquidity in the system. Now that is creative. And it's happening. I'm not singing the song of the state, but that is the things happening behind the scene. Government is doing much more than we expect. Now, it comes to central bank. Under the convergence criteria of the ECOWAS monetary policy, like monetary union, the state concerned bank is not expected to put more than 10% of government financing based on their government revenue over the previous year. Yes, but we're borrowing money. We're doing the best that we can. And then, they have to provide as much support. And it's such a tough decision that they have to make. But because you have to make a choice. Do you do inflation targeting at the expense of the level of poverty, the growth and productivity? Or do you energize the economy in such a way that you get us out of crisis and then we'll come and face the reality of what we need to do to make things look sweeter? So it's a very crisis situation. Look at only one term. We only stayed in inflation, in a recession, only one time, and we jumped out very sharp.
But Prof, you also know that in the last 5 recessions that Nigeria has entered, I mean, 3 of them have been in this administration. But if you, in terms of talking about solutions now, the questions about the revenue, funding, the budget. Now, many have raised concerns. They think that, look, if you look just in 2003, budget deficit was 16.4%, today about 40%. So in terms of solutions, what do we need to do now to ensure we don't continue on this path?
But first of all, budget deficit has been within the ambit of the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which says to 3%, although it has marginally increased just over 3%, but the law is being amended. But we still remain the lowest in West Africa in terms of budget deficit to GDP. Many others are in 7%, Ghana is 9%.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying that we couldn't do better. Of course we can. And I have given you some examples of what government is doing to plug the hole. Look at technology is coming into the system to block the leakages. You've seen what TSA has done. It brought some discipline, and all this armchair banking is brought some discipline there. You've seen GIFMIS and how it has. You look at IPPIS, the payroll system, and ghost workers. So it is trying using technology. People are owing the company. You see contractors who are owing government coming to still collect money from other contracts. When they now come, they tell them, look, my friend, you are owing 20 billion from what technology says, and you are collecting 30 billion. Or sort us out. So technology is coming in, and that is what we have done in this National Development Plan, to put technology and innovation technology at the center stage of national planning. And that's what we've done in this new plan, 2021 to 2025, and heading out the agenda. So we are gradually using technology to replace all the shenanigans we are seeing in the oil and gas industry, and then building a new economy that will give more confidence to investors, and people who will be, even the unemployed, are going to be far more confident about the economic and political future of this country. So it's unfortunate that we had a government that doesn't actually sing this song, but I'm not saying that it is about singing song. It's about letting people know what exactly is going on. Just as you have mentioned the printing money palaver. Just sudden confusion about printing money and creating money. People just don't understand the difference between that. It is the Section 2B and Section 17 of the CBN Act confers the sole authority and right to the CBN to issue currency. It's not controvertible.
Right.
But then when you analyze, if we have time, we can come to that, because I think I have a view about this.
Okay, you raised a very important question, so I'd like to bounce this off Mr. Kabweze in Abuja. So, Mr. Kabweze, Prof said that, government should let people know what is going on. We're still trying to recover from the back and forth on this 60 billion naira that was printed by CBN or not. But for the average Nigerian out there, they hear government is doing this, government is doing that, but they look at the reality and what they see is way different. You've referenced inflation, headline inflation, 18%, talk about unemployment. And these are figures that are rising, not figures that dropped. they rise successively. Unemployment just over 20%. At some point it was 27, now 33%. They look at other things. We'll not even go into security because we might say that is outside your purview, definitely. But it has its impact on the economy and the SMEs as well. I mean, these are, like Prof said, they can generate way more. But I mean, the average SME out there will tell you what they have to go through just to eke out a living. So is this a case of government not doing enough to tell people what exactly is going on, or this is a case of give us a little bit more time, you might see the fruit of what we're doing?
Well, the honest truth is we're probably too busy, our hands are too full, trying to get done what needs to be done to fix this economy. And if we spend all of the time talking, we hope that with time the results will speak. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And as I said, look, it's the thing. Ultimately, people are not as interested in what you're doing as the results they get. And we understand that. So that's why we're focused on it. One of the things that we lack, in this country is intellectual rigor. Just questioning, okay, so inflation is, 18%. Textbook, inflation, too much money chasing too few goods, it pushes up inflation. But when you interrogate the, Nigerian inflation, first of all, food inflation is the key driver of that inflation. Food inflation is running at over 21%. So what is responsible for food inflation? Insecurity is a big contributor, because the parts of the country from where a lot of our food supply comes, a lot of the farmers can't even go to farms. Some of them some of them can't go back to harvest what they've seen. We've also got other structural factors like the wastage of the high level of wastage.
If I could just come in briefly, you just further indicted government when you mentioned...
and also even the transportation.
Pardon me, you just further indicted government when you mentioned security, insecurity being a factor in this, inflation, food inflation figure. So that's, are you saying it is the job of the people? This is still the job of the government. I just said it's maybe outside of your purview when I mentioned it earlier, but you further just said it's government responsible for this as well.
I'm not sure that is I'm not sure that is the issue here. Security is government's, is the responsibility of government. The Constitution makes that, very clear. But, and we all know the basis for the insecurity. The armed forces say that they're doing their best is for Nigerians to judge that, that. From our own side on the fiscal, our job is to try and provide, as much of the resources that they require. Unfortunately, given the constraints that we have, the fiscal constraints, we're not able to provide all of the resources that the security agencies, say they need to tackle. And it's a delicate balancing thing. You've got to keep, juggling and providing. I mean, right now you've heard about the push for a supplementary budget. The security, if we're going to go ahead with a supplementary budget, security will be a key, part of that. In the 13.6 trillion naira budget we have for, 2021, 2.1 trillion naira of that is for security and defense. From the 13.6 trillion, that was the most we could, eke out. Okay. But then it turns out not to be adequate. They need additional resources, and so you heard Professor Ken, part of what we've got to admit when we use the word security, insecurity, it sometimes minimizes the reality of the fact that, as Professor Ken said, that we're effectively a nation at war, and when a nation is at war, there's some things that happen, including war tax and whatever and all of that. So we've got to go back to the fact that we all need to, make a little more, sacrifices personally. If, for instance, we freed up the, 1+ trillion naira on fuel subsidy that will provide additional resources for security and for tackling some of these other problems that we allude to. We've got in 2020 we had a 502 billion naira tariff shortfall in the power sector that government has to take responsibility for to fund. This year, we project the tariff shortfall at 300 billion naira that government again has to take responsibility for. If we eliminated all of those, there'll be a lot more resources available. But the reality of doing that is that people like you and I will have to pay more than we currently pay for certain things, including.
Okay, well, Mr. Kabuzi, I'm wondering how many, if people even understand, what you say when you say that people need to pay more. But as you said, let's begin to look at solutions. So, Mr. Oluwade, one of the things that comes to my mind about this whole tax thing is the number of taxes and levies that every micro, small, and medium enterprise, as well as even the big multinationals, have to pay from time to time. Individuals pay taxes and levies. Corporations pay taxes and levies. Micro, small, and medium enterprises pay taxes and levies. That's on the one hand. On the other hand is the question of what are the things that government is doing with my taxes in a way that it will encourage me to pay more. But, you mentioned SMEs the other time, Mr. Oluwade. So I just want to ask you, how significant is these taxes and levies, the plethora of taxes and levies that the micro, small, and medium enterprises that you talked about the other time, how significant is the impact on their ease of doing business in a way that they can even have more confidence to pay more taxes?
Thank you very much, Ayo. And I'll answer from the last bit of your question. The joke out there amongst Nigerians is that we are individuals as we represent governments, like local governments, because we're paying for, we dig our boreholes. Over the weekend, if I were to tell you how much I spent on diesel, to power generator, you'll be stunned, and I'm sure that's the story across most Nigerian households. Now, I mean, the list is endless, so for me, asking those who pay taxes, those who are employed, or businesses, industries, to pay additional taxes, I think that would be an overkill, and I think that would be unjust, because we're paying so much taxes, as it were, and what exactly do we get in return from the government? Insecurity. To move goods from parts of the country to the other part of the country on our roads, either the bandits or criminals will lay them, attack them, kill them, and all of that. A commuter, transport moving from one part of the country to the other pays taxes before they leave the park. From on the road, they meet various checkpoints. They have to pay, to service those checkpoints. Then they have to, every state you pass through, you need to pay all kinds of so-called revenue collection agencies and all of that, so that's an overkill for me. The straightforward response is to solving this debacle. Like I said, every serious economy, advanced economy that I know of in the world is tax-driven. Those economies are tax-based and tax-driven. The minimum taxes, tax to GDP is almost 40, 50, 60% in some cases. Even in some cases, almost 100%, because some of those countries they're not resource-based, natural resource-based economies. So what is the straightforward solution? Number one, like I said, it's all about jobs. Jobs. We need to create massive jobs for the unemployed Nigerians. And then, of course, number two, how do you do that? And I love that Professor Ken Ife, agrees with me. We need to invest massively in the MSMEs sector. In any serious economy also, the engine of development, of growth, real growth, employment is the MSMEs. How many people are the government going to employ? Even the industries, how many people are they going to employ? It is the MSMEs, the informal sector, the services sector, agricultural sector. Those are the sectors that we need to invest in massively, to lift out people from mass poverty. And I need to say this on this channel, for as long as Nigeria has the number 190 million, in extreme poverty, this country can make any progress. Even if you bring all the billions of dollars from wherever, for as long as we don't lift out, the 100 million thereabouts, people living in extreme poverty, Nigeria can go anywhere. So let's have a master plan for poverty eradication. And then, of course, like I said, widen the tax base. And then, of course, and I'm glad the government key officer is here. We need to cut out massive wastages in government expenditure. Mr. Kabuzi says, we have so much to do, but we don't have revenues. But even the meager revenues we have, I see massive hemorrhaging, leakages, unnecessary expenditure in both in the federal government, state governments. Let's even reduce the convoy of governors, president, ministers, and all of that. Let's remove completely some of these obscene perks and benefits of some of these, revenue generating agencies. Some of them earn maybe $1 trillion in a year, and they spend 90% of that, and grudgingly remit to the federal government, maybe 10%. That can happen, because we're all Nigerians, we're all patriots, we're all stakeholders in this project, Nigeria. So if a few people are earning so much money, and the majority of people are living in extreme poverty, that can be a just society. So those are my, basic thoughts. Cut out massive wastages in government expenditure.
So quickly, do you want to quickly respond to that?
Well, we're focused on trying to cut waste. There's some called efficiency unit. I think shortly they're going to be actually speaking publicly. Just to what Professor Kenny first said about government not talking about some of the initiatives. But from where I sit, when I take the budget, this 13.6 trillion naira budget, the total overhead budget for all of the over 1,200 MDAs that I have to plan for is 313.1 billion naira. For the 60 government-owned enterprises, 63 government-owned enterprises whose budgets are mainstreamed, is another 312.9 billion. Between the two, that's 626 billion naira. That's 5% of the budget, size. So if I made that zero, it still doesn't move on my fiscal challenge. So there are people dealing with all of those, whatever, and yes, there is wastage. The next thing someone will say, oh yeah, the budget, but that's less than 1% of the total. If I made that zero, it doesn't solve my problem. It's not to say we should not focus on those things, but I'm saying even, those are not the things that will deliver the solution.
What will make a big impact?
The solution is we've got to grow the revenue base of this economy. Look, we talk about agriculture being, well over 20% of GDP. In terms of contribution to government revenues, under 1%. Services sector, 50 plus percent. Because of the structure of those. The services sector that we talk about is largely artisanal, informal. The level of informality. That's why you look at under the economic sustainability plan, you see government offering free registration to these guys, offering incentives for 1 million SMEs or more. Just come and register, finding some whatever. We've got to increase the formality of this, of this economy, so that you can, all those people can become visible to the tax, and that's part of how you can sit there. So otherwise, it's not going to.
What about the states? Are you co-opting the states along in this journey?
Yes, the Joint Tax Board, working together now. That's why you now have a unified national tax ID number.
Because when you look at
which every taxpayer in the country is saying, and there's a uniform tax base.
When you look at the fact that a lot of states are dependent on FAC, if there is no FAC allocation, they will be broke, as it were. a lot of people will say that we should also be, and that's where the action is happening in the States. The people live in the States. The question is, how can we co-opt the states to ensure that they are also on board and also trying to get productivity going on in their own states as well?
Well, I mean, I'm one person that believes that there's no state in this country that is not potentially viable. It's for, the people who run those, states, the economies, to basically, put on their thinking cap. Once I had to speak to one of the states. I said, you think you have nothing? And I gave them the example of Nevada, a state, in this arid land, desert land, no whatever. They built an economy on sin. I was not, me, I wouldn't be an advocate of whatever. But, so Nevada's economy is built on what's called sinning. Come and sin, but we'll make the money off you. And they created a massive economy out of nothing. So people just need to think whatever. But again, IGR doesn't grow on nothing. So people say, oh, the state's IGR is... You've got to create an economic base in the state. For people, for people to... If people are not engaged in economic activity, they have no taxable... No, it's not the taxes of, civil servants. In many of those states, they call them civil service states because almost everybody is employed by government. There's hardly any presence of... So we must get to competitive fiscal federalism where the states can compete for industry, to attract industry. And in other federations, states, the federal has, corporate and personal taxes. The states have corporate and personal taxes. And so they can use policy to attract, and we have a unified sort of system here.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. We're totally out of time. I've been trying to see if we can wrap this up or wrap it up well as well. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Today this morning. Mr. Ben Akabweze is the Director General of the Budget Office. Mr. Wale Oluwade is the CEO of Growth Masters Consulting. And we also heard from Professor Ken Ife on Zoom, who's a macroeconomic policy analyst. Well, that's it for this segment. We have to thank you all for coming. Sunrise Today continues to take on another matter in a moment. Please stay with us. Well, Mr. Mike Ejiofor joins us right now. We're going to be reviewing the security situation. A lot just keeps unfolding in that particular area. Every time you open the pages of newspapers or you tune in to watch the news, it's one story after another. Yesterday, Benue State came into focus. There were attacks in Benue, and some people lost their lives as a result of that attack. I mean, that is minus the accidents, the fuel tanker, which, turned upside down and, caused some loss of lives in the process. But we have right now in the studio Mr. Mike Ejiofor, who's a former director of the DSS, with us in the studio. I don't know, we saw the Nigeria Governors Forum, members of the Nigeria Governors Forum at the presidency sometime last week, asking the federal government to help make sense of all that is happening security-wise in the country. As somebody in that particular sector, have you been able to string, all that has been happening in the country security-wise into something that makes sense?
Well, honestly speaking, any patriotic Nigerian must be worried on the security situation in the country. Where are we starting from? Is it the Northeast that we have been fighting insurgency for 10 years? Or Northwest that is witnessing kidnapping, ransom payment, and all? Or is it the Southwest that has also joined in the agitation of self-determination? Or is it in the Southeast that you now see militias attacking government facilities, police stations, correctional facilities, and burning down vehicles, even to the extent of going to the police headquarters? So for me, it's a very disturbing situation. And the earlier government does something about it, the better, because if government fails to do something and this thing degenerates, I'm afraid this country will be heading into the precipice.
Well, you said something that just caught my attention. You said, where do we start from? Is it the northeast where we have been fighting Boko Haram. The question is, how could we have been fighting something for how long? For at least 12 years now, and it doesn't look like we have made progress. It looks like, you know, the problem seems to be morphing. And then, you know, on top of that, you know, we will hear of attacks. The last one we heard was of Damasak, where the governor even had to go and spend the night. The military said, oh, look, it wasn't a takeover. We repelled them and we've taken over the town. Nonetheless, there was an attack. How can we be fighting something and, you know, it doesn't look like we're making progress? We've been at it for 12 years.
You see, the problem is government approach to the issue is not encouraging. Government might come up, you see, there have been series of agitations on the rejigging of the security architecture that took government a lot of time, you know, to effect change in the leadership of the various security agencies, especially the armed forces, that people have been talking about that is skewed towards a particular geopolitical zone. Now, there has been a rejig. We have new henchmen and affair. But again, if that's the insurgents, the bandits, we will not tell you, well, if you think rejigging or changing the leadership is the problem, we'll tell you that is not the problem. The problem is structural. We need to look at the various components in this country and restructure. There has been a lot of agitation calling for restructuring. We need to practice true federalism, true fiscal federalism. So until that is done, we'll continue to have this problem. The security architecture, for instance, like I've said, we need to look at the issue of establishment of the state police. I continue to emphasize on this. And people will begin to say, why do you always talk of establishment of the state police? Security problem is local. So the solution to must be local. You don't expect to get, like you said when you started, you don't expect to begin to do the same thing the same way and expect a different result. So that's why we've been fighting this for over 12 years in the Northeast. Let the people who are on ground, who know the terrain, take responsibility. If the solution you proffer for Northeast, for instance, might not work in Niger Delta. It might not work in Northeast because there are different problems. But when they come and you apply the same solution overboard, you're not going to get any result. And that's what we're facing.
We saw some developments in the southeast of the country. It's going to a little over a week now. Ebubeagụ was formed, and they say it has become operational by the Southeast governors. And a number of them have been on air to try and clarify, you know, the role of Ebubeagụ, even though, you know, people already think that there could be, you know, some immediate challenges for for the security architecture as you know, as it currently exists, because it was seen that in the absence of them forming something, you know, the space has been taken over by ESN, Eastern Security Network. So the question has been, how was Ebubeagụ going to work with Eastern Security Network? Well, what are your thoughts in that regard?
It's very funny. Incidentally, I was in Umuahia when the announcement was made on formation of Ebubeagụ, and I asked, what are the structures on ground before the formation of Ebubeagụ? Is there any legal backing to Ebubeagụ? The Eastern Security Network that was formed, we all agree is illegal and cannot take charge of the security space in that area. But the governors too, in a bid to be looked as good boys, I'm very disappointed that looking at them as, you know, we are on the same page with federal government. What page are you on with the federal government? The page of allowing people who cannot be identified attacking military formations, attacking correctional facilities, releasing prisoners. So, you see, there should have been a legal framework before the launch of the Operation Ebubeagụ. Now that it has been formed, has it taken off? Where are the logistics?
They say it has.
Where are the logistics?
Some people will say, but that's not how it works in the Southwest.
No, in the Southwest, when the Operation Amotekun took place, the whole state government backed it up by law.
Yes, but that was after the formation.
But they provided vehicles. And you saw when they bought the vehicles, the governors all were there displayed. So there's nothing on ground now in the Southeast to support Ebubeagwu. So it's quite unfortunate. It's just like putting the cart before the horse.
What is unfortunate? The idea of Ebubeagwu.
Both the idea, the concept, and everything.
It's not what you're thinking of.
It's not. It's not.
When you say state police, it's not what you quite have in mind.
No. You see, what they are trying to do is like involving community policing. But if you go to the Southeast, I can tell you, right from, I travel by road from Delta to Umuahia, right from Onitsha to Umuahia, you will not see a single police or military checkpoint. And what does that tell you? Our military forces have been awed. They have been intimidated, going out of the field because of these people. So, and what you see in various communities are vigilantes taking charge of responsibility. And you see that apart from Eastern Security Network that is now wreaking havoc, which they have denied, but I don't believe it. I believe that there are people behind it. If you go to various communities, you see vigilantes taking charge of security in that. You don't have, apart from this agitation from the Eastern Security Network, IPOB, you hardly can see any criminal activity. The people kidnapping are just normal crimes within the environment, which you cannot rule out in any given society. So we need to look critically. You recall, on the 17th of September, 2017, on this very studio, I warned on the prescription of IPOB and classifying it a terrorist organization. If you go to your archive, you see it. That if you drive these people underground, it will become difficult for government to handle. And this is exactly what we are facing now. So it's a big challenge. That was exactly how the issue of Boko Haram was also mishandled in the Northeast. So our political leaders must put this country first, because they are even creating more problems for our security agencies to operate. And you make them look ineffective, you make them look weak, some provocative statements being made by politicians which are also capable of inflaming passions and degenerating to conflict, which we are facing now.
You know, I don't even know where to start with the question because so many questions twirling in my head. But you talked about how there's no structure on the ground and no laws backing it. A number of them said, "Oh, we're going to be relying on vigilante network," which you already say you saw. Who knows? Maybe that's what they're referring to as being part of what is the structure that already exists on the ground. Because a number of them said, "Oh, in Enugu, for instance, you have forest guards.
Yes.
In Abia State, you have homeland security or something to that effect." So they already have some sort of network that already takes care of security internally in their state. What they're now saying is that we're going to leverage that to do Ebubeagwu.
How are you going to coordinate them? This thing should have been put on ground before launching the Operation Ebubeagwu. That's the point I'm making. I'm not saying, in fact, most of those vigilantes are not controlled by government. They are not paid by government. They are controlled by the various communities. And that is what security is all about. It must be localized. The problems there are local, and the solutions must be localized. I'll give you an example. I'll continue to emphasize this. You bring policemen, soldiers from the Northeast and deploy to Southeast. One, they don't understand the language. There's cultural difference. There is even no confidence to even volunteer information. So how do you expect to work? It's funny. It's funny.
So I'm still trying to make sense of all of that. So when the governors met with the presidency, we haven't heard from the side of the presidency whether, you know, it's something that the outcome of the meeting is something that we're going to be expecting, you know, sometime soon. Because when they say, oh, help us make sense of all that is going on in the country, and you have been able to state the different challenges that we're facing in each locality in the northeast, the problems are different. In the northwest, banditry seems to be it seems to be calming down somewhat. Do you think it's as a result of any...
It's not coming down.
It's just not in the news?
There's a law, especially in the northwest. You know, we're observing fasting now. So that's responsible for what we think there is a law in the issues of banditry, especially in the northwest, where it is very prevalent.
You think the fast is responsible for the law?
Yes. Oh, yes. Some of them too pray. They are religious people. They are not, they don't come from the sky. At times, they also want to pray to God. Even an armed robber, going will pray to God to save him from his operations. So you know it's not right.
It's all very, it's all very, should I say, dampening. I mean, the fact that this is not owing to any security, will I say, onslaught on the bandits. This is as a result, but that's what you say. It's as a result of the fast.
It's the result of the fast. You can see that there's not so many attacks now, even in the northeast, apart from Borno, for instance, where you have communal attacks and in a few places.
Yeah, we saw a situation in Adamawa yesterday where I think the SGF, you know, went to visit some communities there affected by I think there was some attacks on those communities as well. But looking on the whole, I mean, if you were sitting, I don't think that you have the sort of information that the president has about the country. However, if you were just sitting and observing from the different areas, you know, of this country and the challenges that are coming from the different areas, what would you be prescribing to the governors to be doing in their zones? Because at the end of the day, he cannot do it all by himself. Yes, we have the police that he's giving them mandates over and over again to do what it is that they can. What would you be proffering as a lasting solution? It might not materialize overnight, but something that, you know, would help and also give confidence to Nigerians that indeed somebody is in charge of security in the country.
You see, the concept of regional security is very good, but it has its own limitations. The advantage it has is that you can go across to other states, and if it's well coordinated, you cannot cross borders just without being detected. There must be a combination of all the security networks within the various geopolitical. So you can see that because of the structured nature of Amotekun, there's a law, even though it's not, there's no society without crime. But you can see that in the southwest, it has gone down because of the structure, and you have seen arrests being made by Amotekun, and a few of them that are effective. So it's a good concept, but what I'm saying, the point where I differ from the Southeast governors is that there's no structure on ground. There's no structure on ground. The operations, they are not completely defined. So it's not going to work.
So should the president be encouraging the formation of regional security outfits?
The president should not be encouraging. The president should send a bill to the National Assembly to enable us to have state police. The fear people are expressing is that it will be abused. And I ask, the present Nigeria police as it is it not being abused? There's law. That's why the law is there. If you abuse the law will take care of yourself. So we cannot continue this way and expect a positive result. Honestly speaking, that's my view.
Some people have said that, okay, maybe one of the reasons why we're also seeing it's not yet where that the security situation could escalate. They're also tying it to politics, because as you might have noticed, you know, politicking for 2023 has already begun, even though we're just in 2021. And they believe that there could be an uptick as, you know, 2023 approaches. For a number of them, they say that the security architecture as it currently is operating, you know, could be helping. However, they wonder whether those security outfits, the vigilantes and what have you, will still be for the purpose of security as elections approach. What are your thoughts on that?
If we don't get these things right before 2023 election, if we don't get all these things sorted out, the various security challenges in the various geopolitical zones, if we don't get them sorted out before 2030, I can assure you, I'll predict there won't be election. There will be crisis in this. There will be anarchy in this country. So we need to sort out these things before we let us talk about this country before talking about elections. If we continue like this, there won't be election in 2023 because of series of agitation. 2 days ago, you saw what happened in Ibadan. Even though I saw Chief Okpadeku this morning that he's not talking about separatist movement, but restructuring. Everybody's asking of us, so what is holding us from restructuring the country? There's no state in this country that cannot survive on its own. But because of what people call this feeding bottle approach, at the end of the month, everybody runs to Abuja to collect money. It makes states very lazy. Otherwise, they look inward.
It's all a big problem. As we wrap up now, I wanted to quickly ask you, there have been issues, questions raised about the screening of current Minister Mr. Asa Pantami. I don't know whether you have had cause to also take note of the controversy and what role the DSS, I mean, is this something that could have skipped their own perusal or their own screening of the current minister?
Well, you see, honestly, I am not the spokesperson of the SSS, but I can tell you that it will be difficult for that information to have passed the State Security Service. They must have it on record of his sympathy for Al-Qaeda and some of these terrorist organizations. Yes, what is vetting? Vetting is to look at the suitability or otherwise of any political appointee. Now, if the State Security Service, for instance, submits a report on an individual to government, and government fails to act on it, who is to blame? You are a witness to issue of Magu, where the Senate rejected 3 occasions. But he remained in office until government found it necessary to remove him. So the point I'm making is, I don't know Pantami as a person, but having come out to say yes, even despite the earlier denials, to come out to say yes, I had a different perspective, just like any other person. At my youth, yes, I did this. But now I've seen a broader perspective, and I see better. I think that matter should be laid to rest. Because, you see, I'll give you an example from the Holy Bible. The person who persecuted Christians most was Saul. But he later converted and became the main apostle of Christ, propagating the gospel. So if he says that he has seen a broader light and is no more connected with these people, let us try to give him a chance and see if because there is no evidence that he is a member of any terrorist organization. The issue is that he is sympathetic to the cause of it, and everybody has leaning. You remember President Jonathan said that they even have members of Boko Haram in government. Before a president will come out to say that, then he must have known some persons. So what I believe that the State Security Service, if they didn't have the information, which I very much doubt, is to monitor him and see how he can be saved. But to say that because he was linked to a terrorist group, which cannot be established in the realm of speculation, I think is dissipating energy. We will have more challenges. We will have more security challenges that would. This to me, even though it's fundamental, is distracting.
Well, we have to thank you for your thoughts on that one. We have been speaking with Mr. Mike Ejiofor, who is a former director with the DSS. Well, we have your messages here with us. Some of you have sent in your messages. Comrade Francis Osedume says, there's no better way to improving security than adequate funding, enough manpower, improved intelligence and mindset orientation. We have brave and gallant men in the Nigeria police force. Well, that's his own thoughts.
Uncle Sam says, in Nigeria, we need a leadership that will revive our nature, the peace and unity that we uphold.
Andrew Alola, first, Falola says that I'm not against increase in tax net and taxes, but the government should reduce over bloated cost of governance. And you remember that talk about Saul Paul trended yesterday, saying that, I mean, he wasn't in government, for crying out loud. Saul Paul, he wasn't in but yeah, there you go.
And even the Auditor General's report too, all those leakages coming through from there. Well, look at this one from Andrew. He says, I suppose Nigerians wouldn't necessarily object paying more tax. Has the sense of government accountability isn't sparsely assured. After all, fuel price hike haven't been largely pushed back. Oh, okay. You're trying to wrap your head around it, right?
GFK has this one. The central bank is violating a clear law by continuing to advance these monies to the federal government, and this has been happening since 2015. It's a surprise that inflation rate chart is going up and the naira continues. Is it a surprise, as I was asking? Is that inflation is going up and the naira continues to lose value? He says it's a big no. The question is, what law is the central bank violating? I don't know about that one. But thank you so much for sending in your thoughts and your comments. We really appreciate them. We hope to be here again tomorrow. Thank you for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Kikilu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
I'm Chamberlain, so see you next time.